Alonso slams Aston Martin. Aston Martin's regular podium-challenging form from the first third of the Formula One season feels like a distant memory, despite Fernando Alonso finishing second just a couple of races ago. And the team from Silverstone is now just a team that competes for the second place rather than a surprise package. And while the critics from Alonso apparently don't touch Mike Krack, still it's bad to see a team which was filled with harmony at the start of the season slowly lose their composure amid bad results. It does look like Aston Martin's good results were just pure luck, and whatever Alonso is managing these days is only to his skill set and not the car itself. Alonso's podium at Zandvoort appears increasingly attributed to the two-time world champion's exceptional skill rather than a resurgence of Aston Martin to their position early on in the season, but nevertheless, they remain determined, committing to extensive development of their AMR 23 throughout this late stage of the season. The team expresses confidence in their pursuit of second place in the Constructors' Championship, though in reality, it seems they are holding on by a thread. The reality is that most teams are doing this because many of the developments being brought will be their 2024 cars. So given the current trajectory, they are losing ground, and it's hard to see this changing in Suzuka, Qatar, Austin or Brazil. I don't know what the benefit of the winglet in the rear crash structure brings, but it looks like something that works in CFD but not on the track while trying to do 2.5-second pit stops. Sadly for him, the spotlight will also fall on Lance Stroll, as he is a decent enough driver, but he is under immense pressure now, and it's showing the cracks that he has in his armor as he chases a result. Indeed, with the pressure, even Alonso and his pit crew made mistakes in Singapore. I think it's possible Aston Martin might be one of the more prolific developing front-running teams between Zandvoort and Abu Dhabi, and we know McLaren always had that big Singapore package planned because it significantly reworked its car design. But Red Bull switched focus early, and Ferrari Mercedes have bigger car changes planned for 2024, so I'm not expecting anything too dramatic from them. Whether it's enough to drastically change Aston's prospects, I definitely can't say, but I think their narrative of "we will be pushing this car's development to the end" is quite different to those immediately around them. "We've seen from the beginning of the season that the margins are incredibly tight now," said Aston Martin Technical Director Dan Fallows in Singapore. "And we still have a competitive car. We knew that we would do better in Singapore than we were at Monza, but there's no doubt that it's a very tough race with the top 4 or 5 teams now, and we are absolutely up for the challenge. We're not stopping our development process. We're going to carry that on deep into the final parts of the season, with a view to taking those developments forward to next year as well. We're definitely up for the fight." While a challenging weekend at Monza was expected, the experience in Singapore was particularly discouraging, and despite the team's belief in the car having a happy balance, Alonso's performance did not meet his pre-weekend expectations. A stronger showing in Japan would greatly help change the prevailing notion that Aston Martin's season is losing steam. The emphasis placed by Aston Martin team boss Mike Krack on Lance Stroll's well-being after his significant crash in qualifying spoke volumes about the intensity of the weekend. It was a disastrous showing overall, and even Alonso, rarely off his game, had a series of uncommon mistakes, including a penalty-induced curb trip during pit lane entry and a spin during the Grand Prix. From the onset of the first practice, Alonso recognized that his team was in for a more challenging weekend in Singapore than they had hoped for. "We didn't have the pace that we were hoping for, and too many things went wrong," Alonso said of the Grand Prix. "A race to forget. All of those issues in one race, that's a good thing. Hopefully we can get rid of all these bad things, learn from those and get better in Japan." Suzuka is a track which presents a distinct set of challenges for the car and its overall package compared to Singapore, making it plausible for Aston Martin to show improved competitiveness. However, if their bad showcases in Italy and Singapore are indicative of a wider trend, rather than isolated incidents related to specific track characteristics, then Japan may not yield a significantly different outcome for the team. Various theories have circulated regarding Aston Martin's performance this season. The speculation includes the impact of clampdowns on flexi-wings and Alonso's theory about changes in tyre construction around Silverstone. However, it appears that fundamentally, the team has been surpassed in terms of development, as the most straightforward explanation appears to be that Aston Martin has struggled to sustain its performance level and has been overshadowed by others who have executed a superior job. Singapore was the first time in 2023 agree that Alonso, who was the team's only representative in the race after Lance Stroll's qualifying accident, had missed a point, and Mike Krack understood why the Spaniard was so frustrated in the cockpit. "As a team, we need to acknowledge if a driver is critical," he said when asked about Alonso's comment. "Obviously, there is not the performance that he's expecting and that he's used to, and then I think it's okay. We want them to give everything, and then it's normal that also sportsmen react like that, so it's not a problem." Alonso had been on schedule for a solid 6th place in Singapore when his race began to fall apart, and he eventually finished P15. "We thought we had a good rhythm," said Krack. "I think we knew up front that it would be difficult to go with the front guys, so I think on the medium, everything ran pretty solid. Then after the safety car, we fitted the hard tyres, and we struggled a bit more. We need to understand why, to a point where we said when the virtual safety car came, we were not sure that we could go the full distance with a decent level of performance." The overall performance trend since the Canadian GP for the Silverstone outfit has been disheartening, especially considering the potential they had for this season, and this decline is worrying as it represents a clear negative trajectory for the year, with the risk of losing momentum. A more generous interpretation, I'd say, is that perhaps this year came too early for Aston Martin, as the team has been grappling with infrastructure challenges, which are only now being addressed with the mid-season transition into the new factory and the development of a new wind tunnel underway. Additionally, the recruitment of top-tier technical talent from other teams led to the integration of existing concepts in the creation of the AMR23. However, tasking these minds with generating entirely new ideas from scratch proves to be a more demanding endeavor. Whenever Aston Martin personnel talk publicly, they don't seem to be reacting too dramatically to the situation, as they keep saying that they feel they've got a good car, they've still got developments coming, and they aren't giving up on second in the championship. But in reality, I think the team should probably be more worried about losing 4th to McLaren, which has outscored Aston 122 to 63 since a massive car upgrade in Austria, than feel it has any real business aiming to get ahead of Mercedes and Ferrari. Aston Martin trails Mercedes by 72 points now, with Ferrari turning a 14-point deficit to Aston Martin into a 48-point advantage in just 2 races. Aston Martin hit the ground running with a well-sorted car, while others were in disarray. Mercedes, Ferrari and McLaren had lower-hanging fruit to find in improving their cars and have gradually overhauled Aston on one-lap pace. And if we look at the supertime comparisons, Aston's been in broadly the same position since Canada, 5th or 6th fastest, and the gap to Red Bull hasn't necessarily ballooned, it's just others tend to slip into that gap more than before, so the recent results have been broadly in keeping with Aston's performance in the middle phase of the season, and the reality is that's just top 10 contender rather than outright frontrunner, and I think challenging for top 5 positions is still perfectly possible. Falling away from its ambitious goal of 2nd in the championship doesn't render this year a failure. It's still an obvious success for a team in transition. It would just simply be worse to end in decline, which is what Aston Martin's trajectory has been on for some time now. Ultimately, it needs a more competitive car, and 2 drivers getting the most out of it, not just one, to buck that trend. What do you think? Could Aston Martin bounce back in Japan, or will they continue and finish the season in a mediocre fashion? Let us know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video.